Let's meet another one of our famous Ozark people and learn another Ozark vocabulary word. We're still in March Madness here, so you know we got another round ball. This time it's a guy. And I should point out that none of the people pictured in our March Madness edition actually played in March Madness. These are all kind of pre the madness of the NCAA tournament. But this guy was a great college player, and I would be absolutely shocked if anybody knows who this is. He's not as famous as the Redheads.
Can you give us a time frame?
This picture is probably from the 40s. Probably from the 40s. I'll just go ahead and tell you who this one is. His name was Gordon Carpenter. Gordon Carpenter, nicknamed Shorty, as all tall people were back in those days. Just kind of a rule, you know. And if you were real short, you were Stretch or something like that. But Gordon Carpenter, he was from Ash Flat, Arkansas, which is not too far from where I grew up in Arkansas. And as you can see, there was a star for the University of Arkansas and was an U.S. Olympic player. And if he had lived 10 years later, he almost certainly would have been a player in the early years of the NBA, but the NBA really didn't get rolling until the 1950s when he was past his prime. And so he played professional basketball, but it was in the pre-NBA days. In those days, you've heard of the AAU. Today we think of the AAU as it's the Amateur Athletic Union. It's something that high school kids play in the summertime, in the spring after the high school season's over. But back in those days, the AAU was a network of like corporate teams. Sometimes college teams would be in this. In the early days of organized basketball, companies would have their own basketball teams. If you can tell the jersey there, it says Phillips 66. And in those days, Phillips 66 had one of the great powerhouse basketball teams in the AAU, and they would play other corporate teams, and they would have these annual tournaments and crown champions of the leagues and stuff like that. And the way that these corporate teams worked is that the corporations would actually hire these basketball players and would put them on the payroll, but the main thing that they did was play basketball. And then usually if you kept your nose clean and you stayed loyal to the company, when you got past your prime and you couldn't really be an effective basketball player anymore, you'd usually take some kind of job with the corporation. And so that happened with a lot of teams. And a lot of these were out west, like Phillips 66. But Gordon Carpenter was one of the great pre-NBA players.
How tall was he?
Hey, I've seen anything from 6'5" to 6'7", so I don't really know exactly how to. So he was certainly in those days. He would have been he was a post player in those days. Today you got 6'7" point guards sometimes, but he was a big guy in those days. And this is true. I interviewed just a few years ago. I interviewed his high school basketball coach. His high school basketball coach is still living down in Arkansas. He's way up in his 90s. He's probably about 95 years old today. He's basically the same age as Gordon Carpenter. I think there may be like 1 year difference. And his high school coach is this little bitty guy who was probably about 5'5", who was a college basketball player. And right out of high school, right out of college, he was like 20 years old when he graduated college. He got this job coaching this high school team in Ash Flat, Arkansas, and the team won the state championship. You know where Ash Flat is. You're right there next to it in Cherokee Village. And but in 1939, led by Gordon Carpenter, Ash Flat won the big school state championship of Arkansas, even though it's a town of like, at that time, of 200 people. But back in those days, you could choose which division you wanted to play in. And there were only two divisions. There was the big school and the small school division, and Ash Flat said, hey, we're the best, so let's just play in the big school division. And they actually won the state tournament. That was the only year this little guy coached a high school basketball. What are you going to do after that? You win a state tournament your first year? What he did was retired and went to med school. You know, that's, here we go. And so he became a doctor. And really neat story, though. Of course, it was mainly due to Shorty Carpenter, you know, that they won the tournament. Yeah. No, it was so long ago, you know, if they ever had a sign up on the edge of town, it rotted down years ago. And there are probably most people in Ash Flat today wouldn't know who Gordon Carpenter is if you met. He never moved back there. He always, you know, of course he was a basically a professional basketball player and worked for Phillips 66. And I think he lived most of his life in Colorado, so he never came back.